From the very first second, I knew something was wrong. It was barely sunrise when I heard the frantic knocking on my apartment door, a sharp and desperate rhythm that sliced through the quiet hallway like a cry for help. I opened the door to find Emma standing there, her hair still damp, her hands trembling, and her breath uneven as though the morning had already defeated her. She lived next door, a quiet, gentle presence I'd exchanged polite smiles with for months, but never truly spoken to. Yet in that moment, with water dripping from her hair and anxiety pooling in her eyes, I felt the beginning of something I couldn't explain. Something that would change everything in my life in ways I couldn't have imagined. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the beauty of helping others, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It truly supports the channel. I didn't know then what her knocking would mean for me. I didn't know how a broken shower could start a chain of events that would make me confront old wounds, heal a heart I thought was permanently damaged, and pull me into a connection deeper than anything I'd felt before. But as she stood in front of me, embarrassed and apologizing for disturbing me so early, something inside me understood that life had just opened a new door, one I wasn't sure I deserved, yet one I couldn't walk away from. Emma explained that her shower had burst a pipe, flooding her bathroom, and she needed somewhere to rinse off before heading to her nursing job at the local hospital. She said it quickly, her eyes darting away as though asking for help made her feel small. But there was nothing small about her. Even in distress, she carried a quiet strength that made the hallway feel warmer. I let her use my shower, assuming it was just a neighborly favor, the kind you do without thinking twice. What I didn't realize was how that simple act would echo into every part of my routine, my emotions, and my future. When she stepped out of my place later that morning, thanking me again with an apologetic smile, I thought life would simply return to normal. I had my own struggles, long working hours at the auto shop, the lingering ache of my recent breakup that had hollowed out the inside of my apartment, and the loneliness that crept into my evenings like a draft under the door. I wasn't looking for change. I wasn't expecting anyone to step into my world. I'd convinced myself that solitude was safer than healing. But the universe rarely asks for permission before sending someone who shifts everything you thought you knew. The next morning she knocked again, softer this time, like she didn't want to bother me but had no choice. Her plumbing problem still wasn't fixed, and she needed to get ready for work. I let her in again, and this time when she walked through my apartment, she paused, noticing things. The empty dining table that hadn't been used in months, the mismatched mug I drank coffee from every morning, the quiet stillness of a home lived in but not really lived. She didn't comment, but I could feel her empathy, warm and gentle, wrapping around the room like sunlight peeking through blinds. Day by day, her visits became a quiet part of my mornings. I'd hear the soft knock. She'd step inside with a grateful smile. I'd offer her a towel and step aside so she could get ready. At first it felt like coincidence. Then it felt like routine. Soon, it felt like something I looked forward to, something that made the mornings feel less empty. She began staying a little longer after her shower, sipping coffee with me in the soft light of the kitchen window. She told me about her work, the elderly patients she cared for, the way she tried to bring hope even on the hardest days. I told her about my life, how fixing cars was the one place I felt confident, how heartbreak had knocked me down harder than I expected, and how I'd slowly been trying to rebuild myself. We talked about ordinary things, grocery stores, rainy days, bad TV shows, but somehow the quiet moments between us felt full, as though we were learning each other's language without saying much. Her presence did something to my apartment, and maybe to me. The space began to feel less like a shelter from the world, and more like a place I didn't want to hide in anymore. Her laughter filled the corners that dust had claimed. Her kindness softened the edges that loneliness had sharpened, and gradually I felt myself waking up from months of emotional numbness. One morning, I noticed she seemed tired, the kind of exhausted that sleep couldn't fix. She tried to hide it, but I could see the heaviness in the way her shoulders slumped and her eyes lost their usual spark. She told me her mother had fallen ill, and she'd been juggling night shifts, doctor appointments, and worry all at once. She didn't ask for help, but she didn't have to. I cooked her breakfast and packed her a meal for work. She protested at first, then smiled, a small, fragile smile that made something in my chest tighten. As the weeks passed, her shower still wasn't repaired. The landlord kept delaying, and she didn't have the savings for a private plumber because her money was going toward her mother's medical bills. She tried to act like it wasn't a big deal, but I could see the stress pulling at her like invisible threads. I insisted she keep using mine. Somewhere along the way, it no longer felt like a favor. It felt right, natural, necessary. She started coming over in the evenings too, sometimes with leftover food from her shift, sometimes just needing company. We talked about everything, our childhoods, our fears, our hopes. I told her how I'd grown up quiet, always feeling like I was watching life instead of living it. She told me how she'd spent years taking care of others because she didn't know how to let anyone take care of her. And somehow, in those long conversations, we discovered a place between us, where we didn't have to pretend. But life doesn't change without testing you first. One night, she came over visibly shaken. She'd received news that her mother's condition had worsened. I could see the terror in her eyes, the trembling in her hands. She tried to stay strong, but when she leaned against the wall and whispered how scared she was of losing the only family she had left, something inside me broke for her. I didn't know how to fix her pain, but I stayed with her through the night. I kept the lights on. I made tea she barely drank. I sat beside her on the couch as silence filled the room, heavy but shared. She fell asleep eventually, her head resting near my shoulder, and in that quiet moment I realized I cared for her more deeply than I'd allowed myself to admit. In the days that followed, she leaned on me more, softly at first, then with trust that felt sacred. I drove her to the hospital when she was too tired to keep her eyes open. I helped her sort out paperwork. I spent long evenings keeping her company while she waited for updates. The woman who once knocked on my door simply needing a shower had become someone whose pain felt personal, someone whose presence felt like light in a place I thought would always stay dim. Her mother eventually stabilized, and when Emma received the news, she collapsed into my arms, crying with relief. It was the first time she allowed herself to break open in front of someone, and the first time I allowed myself to imagine what it might mean to be someone she depended on, not because she needed help, but because she felt safe with me. Around that same time, her landlord finally fixed the plumbing. On the morning she came to tell me, she looked nervous, almost hesitant. She said she wouldn't be needing my shower anymore, and the words hit harder than they should have. The routine we'd built, the connection that had formed in those early morning hours, the understanding that had slowly grown between us, it all rushed into my chest at once, leaving a hollow ache. I told her she was always welcome, whether she needed a shower or not. She smiled, looking down at her hands, and said she already knew that. But I could see something else in her eyes. Something unspoken, something unsure. For a few days she didn't come by. I tried to tell myself it was normal, that she had her own life to return to. But the mornings felt empty again, and I realized how much I'd come to depend on her presence. I missed her voice. I missed her laughter. I missed the way her kindness made the apartment feel alive. And I missed the quiet comfort she brought simply by being near. Then one evening, just as I was convincing myself to let things be, there was a soft knock on my door. Not frantic like the first time, not exhausted like the nights after the hospital. Just gentle, familiar, hopeful. Emma stood there, dressed in her usual scrubs, but she looked different, calmer, lighter. She told me she didn't come because she needed anything. She came because she realized she missed our mornings, our talks, and the quiet safety she felt around me. She said something had changed in her life the day she first knocked on my door, and she wasn't sure how to describe it, but she knew she didn't want to lose it. In that moment, everything fell into place. The routine, the trust, the shared struggles, the quiet bond that had grown stronger with every passing day. The broken shower had brought her to my door, but everything afterward had brought her to my heart. We didn't rush anything. We let things grow naturally. Some mornings she came over just to sit and drink coffee with me before work. Some evenings we talked on the balcony until the sky turned dark. We built something gradual and honest, something rooted in kindness and small moments of trust, And somewhere along the way, the loneliness I once accepted as normal faded into something warm, something whole. Her mother recovered enough to move into assisted living, and Emma found a balance between work, family, and taking care of herself. I rebuilt my confidence and allowed myself to imagine a future that didn't feel empty. And slowly, as life steadied around us, our connection deepened in ways neither of us expected, but both of us welcomed. Looking back, I realized that life doesn't always change through grand events. Sometimes it begins with something as simple as a knock on the door. Sometimes healing arrives disguised as a neighbor needing help. And sometimes, without planning or expecting it, you find yourself standing in the middle of something beautiful, something worth holding on to. If this story touched your heart, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support allows more emotional, meaningful stories to be shared. Before you go, comment below, kindness can change everything. And may your own life be blessed with moments that change everything in the most unexpected ways.